Joining us now, former U.S. Attorney and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General is Harry Litman. Harry, thanks for being here. This ex-DOJ official who asked not to be named told NBC News, quote, it sets him up, Trump, of course, to do the things he has said, to investigate people and send them to jail. So, Harry, how concerned are you about this, especially when we think about the fact that we're having this conversation on July 4th?
It's July 4th, but for immunity, every day now is Halloween, Yamiche. These seem like outlandish scenarios, but what has been stopping Trump so far? There were norms strongly in place. He ran roughshod over them, and the ultimate barriers would be criminal conduct. And the Supreme Court just said, don't worry about those at all. And as you said in your setup, it is what he said he will do. So I think there's a lot of cause for concern. Now, he can't do it alone. He needs the help of, say, an attorney general. But certainly his last term showed that there's no absence of henchmen happy to trade a very prestigious post for doing what he says and just trying to keep the tracks from being set. So it's a bona fide concern. There are so many bona fide concerns now that we would have just, oh, that couldn't be, oh, not in America. I think that day has passed now.
Yeah. And there are a lot of people, as you said, really learning how America functions. One of that, of course, is the powers and the oversight authority of the DOJ. Which one of those have really presidents usually steered clear of? And what levers do you think Trump could potentially pull if he returns to office?
Well, you know, his number one goal, he said, might be to prosecute his enemies. That does mean DOJ. Presidents, since Watergate anyway, have steered very far clear of it, and they haven't needed criminal penalties to do it. It's just been such a very sharp line in the sand as far as norms go. No one's come within miles of it. Trump went past it and erased those completely. Now there's nothing on the other side, not even criminal violations. I don't see what would stop him except the good faith of people in the DOJ to say, well, if you do that, I'll resign. But there'll be somebody else in the waiting when one DOJ person resigns to do his dirty business, it seems to me.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about, as I listen to you, the fact that the liberals on the court said that this really creates the president as a king. I wonder, when you think about who can put a check on the president, whether it's former President Trump or someone else down the line, who can really put a check on the president if they can just say, I'm working on an official capacity here?
I think it's just us. You know, it could be if he also if the Democrats take the Senate, there's some soft checks, but he'll run roughshod over all of those. I really think the lesson after Monday is it's basically down to the electorate to foil at least what might be his extreme plans. Now, going forward, the Supreme Court has changed the balance of the branches, and that's not going to stop. There may be a next Trump in the waiting, but there hasn't been a previous Trump in 200 years. So I think we just have to hope he's defeated, and then we return to some kind of normal government where people don't do this brazenly just because they think they can get away with it.
Yeah, and before we let you go, I want to turn to Missouri. The attorney general in that state says he'll sue the state of New York over the hush money case of Donald Trump, of course, the one where he was convicted and now faces sentencing. Could this further delay sentencing in this case?
So I don't see this one. There is a sentence that we're already are delayed somewhat, and it does show what happens in the wake of these cases, everybody into the pool. But we've had a couple cases recently have gone off on standing. That is, you need to show your own injury. What he says is that that Bragg sort of injured by trying to take a candidate out. Missouri's right to have the candidate of their choice on the ballot. I don't think that's going to cut it in terms of an injury for the Supreme Court. Nevertheless, there's going to be legal arguments rising out of the immunity opinion that Trump will use to say some part of my case just can't stand and it needs to be retried. I don't see those as succeeding, but there are a few points that are definitely debatable.
Yeah, well, there's certainly a lot of questions after that immunity ruling by the Supreme Court. So thank you so much, Harry Litman, for joining us.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more. September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.